berlaku kali ini. Kalaulah aku tidak buat kerja ini, semua ini tidak akan berlaku.
Ini dokumen. Ini untuk kau. Uruskan.
Jangan risau, Tok. Saya tahu. Demi wang, aku lupa halal dan haram. Bos, kontraktor saya dah deal. Bos hanya sign.
Okey, bagian aku macam biasa.
Semuanya berjalan lancar sehinggalah aku dijemput.
Assalamualaikum. Kami daripada SPRM. Sila ikut kami ke Guru Jabatan.
Rasuah adalah satu kesalahan jenayah di bawah Akta Suruhanjaya Pencegahan Rasuah Malaysia 2009. Anda boleh dihukum penjara selama 20 tahun maksima dan denda tidak kurang 5 kali nilai suapan atau RM10,000 Malaysia minima atau mana-mana yang lebih tinggi.
And I will present on the literature review on this chapter. The first one is corruption. The definition of corruption, according to the Transparency International, is the behaviors of the departments or public officers, including politicians and officials, which are improperly and illegally or legally self-enriching or enriching their relative by abusing public power and beliefs given to them. In the book of the Syed Hussein Al-Atas, which is titled Rasuah, Sifat, Sebab dan Fungsi, he explains the concept of corruptions, which are divided into 3 forms, which is bribery, nepotism and public repercussion. Next is the new public management. The origin of this new term was to suggest a fresh point of view on organizational design in the public sector, but after a decade the meaning of this term is in discussion and debates grew into to be numerous, which was an attempt to make government more businesslike and efficient by borrowing ideas and management models from the private sectors. Finally, which is the relationship between the corruption and the new public management. So NPM is the term umbrella that includes various reform strategies. Therefore, it is necessary to distinguish between theoretical model of NPM and the different reform strategies chosen by the government. Corruption is not intentionally caused by administrative reform, but is also not an unintended event. If it happens, it may be due to organizational failure and undesirable consequences. That's all from me. Thank you.
Now, let's move up to the problem statement. Azmi Awang and Azmi in 2012 argued that the performance and integrity of Malaysian public servants are still under question. One of the issues arises as proven the Royal Malaysian Police PDRM, Jabatan Immigration Malaysia, the Road Transport Department JPJ, and the Royal Malaysian Custom KDRM are among the top authorities getting complaints from the general public between 2016 and 2019. This clearly can be shown on the statistics through the Department of National Statistics 2016 until 2019. These are the biggest fear of the public sector because even the government have moved into the new public management, but the corruption issue still happen.
So next, for the symptoms of the corruption. The first symptom is there are secrets. Every continuous process need to follow the chain of command. The documents that are received need to be received by the appropriate people. When the corruption occurs, the information of the company loses its confidentiality. For example, a company join a tender, but they do corruption so that they will free from over-the-counter process. Second one, the power is centralized. As we know, there is chain of command that must be followed in organization. As the corruption occurs, there is the centralization of power. This is said during the contract management, ordering and invoice processing. For example, in the tender bidding, only the service provider from the co-management crony will get the tender. So the final one is show signals of the cartels. Cartel will be consistently awarded by contracts. They will use many tactics such as coordinated exclusionary tactics to make other companies difficult to compete with them. So the consumers will be harmed due to the ineffective suppliers.
Lastly is the personal greed towards wealth. Human nature nowadays crave to have wealth to feel rich, but what differs is the method of gaining it. Nowadays, where the country's economy is low, corruptors play with victims psychologically in order for them to do the dirty work for rewards.
Firstly is corrosive impact on business growth. While there is the negative impact of corruption for the economy, corruption helps the private sector to fix government shortcomings and inefficiency by trying to bypass outdated legislation and red tape. However, it has a long-term impact on business operations on the country's overall governance climate, which would bring bad image to the effectiveness and the credibility of state institutions. Next is negative return on investment. Corruption discourages funding and serves as an unnecessary expense of doing business, lowering investment project viability. This can cause public officials to distribute public resources based on the incentive they offer for executing bribes, such as major infrastructure or defense projects, rather than on the public goods. Lastly, it affects overall institutional government. Corruption is also likely to have a long-term impact towards the regulatory policies and the efficiency of the state level, as it opens to more incentives for politicians and public officials to create more regulations procedures. This would bring more opportunities to extract small payment from citizens and companies.
The GIACC consultation with other agencies and departments formulated and launched the National Anti-Corruption Plan, and is currently overseeing its implementation. The main enforcement agency continues to be Malaysia Anti-Corruption Commission. These two are enforced together being the main anti-corruption bodies in Malaysia. The NACP lays out the government plans and tactics for fighting corruption, improving governance, and ensuring integrity and openness in government activities. The 5-year plan includes 115 activities organized into the 6 key trusts, which are strengthening political integrity, accountability and effectiveness of public service delivery, efficiency and transparency in public procurement, enhancing the credibility of judicial system, institutionalizing the law enforcement agency, and enhancing a good government in corporate activities. The second one is the state switch action on corruption scandal. As seen by some of the high-profile cases now being investigated, the Malaysian government is committed to prompt action in the face of corruption crisis. The GIACC and MACC play a vital role in constituting an important step towards strengthening the institution. The commitment anti-corruption expressed in the 5-year national plan allowed the reform to yield the result quickly. The implementation of more transparent system and procedure, as well as through monitoring and evaluation strategy, is addressing key areas such as political finance, public management, public procurement, and political influence. The last one is allow certain limitation to politicians. Many efforts were taken by government to limit the role of politicians to in almost all statutory body and GLC. The GLC transformation plan introduced in 2008 aims to make public management and GLC more performance-based, and that includes the appointment of senior management and board members. However, the transparency of the board director and senior management, as well as consistent key performance indicators tied to this appointment, have remained unknown. Any recently implemented policy has been This mainly due to the lack of institutionalization of the changes by law and regulation. Political promotion to board and chairmanship has continued making it possible to distinguish between political and corporate concern. Therefore, it is important for the government to present a plan before it gets worse to ensure transparency either in the public and or private sector.
In conclusion, if the corruption is not prioritized as the critical issue, so the population and country will be continue to suffer.